So, it's January 2026, and a single, frankly audacious demand at a global summit is sending some serious shockwaves through the entire international order. Today, we're going to unpack the Economist analysis of a world that feels like it's teetering on the brink.
It almost sounds like the setup to a joke, but it's the biggest story of the week. America apparently wants to buy Greenland. So let's break down how this one bizarre demand managed to spark a full-blown global crisis.
Now, The Economist doesn't treat this like some quirky little news item. Nope, they frame it as a major international crisis, and for a very good reason. Okay, so picture this. The scene is Davos, that annual meeting of the global elite. And the message from the American president, it was crystal clear. We're not talking a lease, we're not talking a treaty. He wanted full ownership of the Danish territory. It was a demand that just stunned everyone, allies and adversaries alike. Just to give you a sense of how serious this is, The Economist actually compares it to the Suez Crisis back in '56. Now, that was the moment when American opposition basically ended Britain and France's time as independent global powers. So yeah, we're not talking about some minor disagreement here. The analysis says this is a fundamental break in the transatlantic alliance. So how on earth does a bizarre real estate proposition become an existential threat to the entire global security order? And that's a fair question, right? Why would a demand for a giant island of ice shake the very foundations of NATO? Well, The Economist's analysis offers a very clear and pretty unsettling explanation. See, here's the thing. The Greenland issue isn't really the cause of the crisis, it's the symptom. The real story is a huge shift in how the U.S. administration sees its oldest allies, not as partners in security, but more like a financial burden. So what you're seeing here are two completely different perspectives. On one side, you have the administration's argument that Europe has been freeloading for decades. But on the other side, you've got the actual history of NATO, an alliance built on mutual benefit, whose collective defense clause, Article 5, has only been used once, and that was to help the United States after 9/11. And this cartoon just perfectly captures the ultimate fear that The Economist is talking about. You've got a Europe facing a threat, reaching for that phone to call its traditional ally, only to find the line is dead. It's such a stark visual for a world where America might have just stepped back from its role as the global protector. But while the West is all tied up in knots over this, other nations are not just sitting around and watching. A shift this big creates a vacuum, and it creates opportunities. They're adapting, they're pivoting, and The Economist highlights one rising power in particular that is really finding its feet in this new, unpredictable world. And that brings us to India. The article presents this really fascinating case study of a nation that's doubling down on economic pragmatism, especially in the face of all these new global challenges. So after an electoral setback in 2024, and now facing new U.S. tariffs, the analysis suggests Prime Minister Modi has really shifted focus. There's this renewed, very practical emphasis on economic reforms designed to supercharge growth at home and make India much more resilient. And the results are, well, they're staggering. The IMF is projecting India's economy is going to grow by 7.4% this year. I mean, that's a huge acceleration and a real bright spot in a world where most growth has been pretty sluggish. And this chart just puts it all into perspective. Look at that. India's growth is projected to blow past China's, and it's more than double the world average. According to the source, this isn't just a little bit of growth. This is the rise of a new economic heavyweight. So how are they doing it? Well, the article details this multi-part strategy. At home, they're simplifying things like taxes and bankruptcy laws. On the world stage, they're on a trade deal spree. And maybe most surprisingly, they're starting to repair their economic relationship with their giant neighbor, China, after years of pretty high tension. So the big takeaway here is a confident India adapting to this new global landscape with smart economic reforms and a sharp new focus on international trade. So, let's pull all these threads together. The Greenland Gambit, the strain on alliances, the rise of newly pragmatic powers. It all points to a pretty sobering final warning from The Economist. And this is the final stark message from the analysis. For decades, American allies in Europe and Asia built their entire security and foreign policy around the certainty of that U.S. alliance. The article argues that that certainty is now gone. So instead of those long-term alliances built on shared values, we're entering an era of shifting transactional relationships. It's a world where every nation's self-interest is calculated deal by deal, which makes global politics far more volatile and way less predictable.
And the ultimate consequence of this shift is deeply troubling. When nations feel they can no longer trust their allies to protect them, the article warns, they're going to try and protect themselves. This could mean rapid rearmament and, most dangerously, more countries trying to get their hands on nuclear weapons.
So The Economist's analysis leaves us all with a critical question to think about. As the major powers chart these new, self-interested courses and all the old certainties just crumble, who's going to get left behind in this new, more dangerous world? And what will they do to survive?